For 88 years, Ocean Spray has been the nation's leader of everything red cranberry. And now they're proud to announce new Ocean Spray Pink Cranberry Juice Cocktail, made from real pink cranberries. Wait, they've been harvesting them for 88 years? I've missed out on a lifetime of refreshing deliciousness?
Introducing new, light, and refreshing Ocean Spray Pink Cranberry Juice Cocktail. Now available at ShopRite.
Better late than never, right?
Hello?
Hi, I'm sorry, the music. Stop it. I can't.
Hello?
Okay, there. Wait, sorry about that. Aloha, everybody. Oh, hold on one moment. Aloha, everybody. I don't know what happened. There was a delay between the show saying it was starting and then it did start. So let me start over, just in case it wasn't being recorded. Aloha, everybody. This is Janet Carol Lessin at Aquarian Radio at aquarianradio.com. And today we're going to do an episode of the Linkage Institute, and we're going to talk about music, frequency, and cymatics in a panel with Janet Carol Lessin, Dr. Sasha Lessin, Michael Lee Hill, and Clay Quanta Price. The Linkage Institute was a dream of AR Bordon for sharing the life physics group discoveries. This series on Aquarian Radio and the stream is being taken up by those inspired by this fascinating material. So before I start the show, I want to start with Dr. Sasha Lessin. Go ahead and say hello to everybody.
Hello, everybody. This is AR Bordon has created a way of relating topological thinking that lets us simultaneously be in many dimensions at the same time. We don't have to get locked into one or the other. And there's just some incredible things that are coming down when you start to really apply this, as AR has. And one of them is that some individuals can be part of a holographic resonance that's touching off in some of us to come together and accomplish things motivated by very powerful Anunnaki who can actually shift dimensions. And so I hope we get to talk a little bit about that, too.
And we're going to start with Michael Lee Hill, who's been on our show many times. Michael, can you hear us? Are you there?
Yes, indeed. That was a trippy intro. I'm really excited about...
So I hit it again, but I couldn't get it to stop. So I didn't want to hit it a third time because then we would have three versions of it playing on top of each other.
You know what?
Sorry for that.
It was perfect. I'm really excited about today's show. When AR Bordon took me under his wing back in 2008, well, first of all, I'm a musician at heart. That's been my love. So I had a lot of questions for AR regarding music and frequency, and he started telling me about true Pythagorean tuning. And so obviously I had a lot of questions being a musician, and it was Clay who actually answered those questions and got me started on understanding the significance of 432 hertz. And So I'm really excited to have Clay on the show and just to be able to pick his brain and for him to, he's a genius when it comes to these things. And so I'm really excited.
Well, we're excited that you're excited. We're excited too. Clay, are you there? And could you please come on and tell us a little bit about yourself, since you're new to our listening audience? Take it away.
Oh, yeah. Sure. I am Clay Price, and I I got introduced to light physics group and AR Bordon stuff probably 6 years ago or something like that, or probably around the same time. I think Michael was kind of in contact with them a little bit before, but I'm also a musician lifelong, and that was another thing that was really intriguing to me was that some of the physics that related how reality functions are related also to music, and it also stemmed from, at a cellular level, how particular frequencies are much more optimizing for DNA, and that optimization creates a higher resonance with your local environment, which light physics gets into some of the science of intention. And when you're immersed in that type of a resonance over long periods of time, starts to accentuate and magnify your intention and your intention's effect on your local physical reality.
Wow.
You know, I think that's in a way those people that are drawn to discuss AR's work right now are sort of focusing our joint intention on bringing the best down to the planet.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
From what I understand, attention is everything. You know, as they say, where your attention goes, energy flows. So it becomes very important to become conscious of what you're thinking about, which is a whole subject matter we can get into. You know,
right.
choose the highest, right?
Your attention
Yeah.
and your intent, what you intend, and that defines who you are as an eternal being. Is always notice what your intentions are, because your intentions are made manifest by your results. So whenever you see the end result, there's something in there that intended it to happen, even if you're having something that you're judging as disastrous, as horrendous. So go back in time. Dr. Lessin's a psychotherapist, and that's one of the things. Where does that come from? Intentions are made manifest by results.
That's just pure existentialism.
Uh-huh.
You can see what your intentions are by what you get, and so you might as well own and take responsibility for creating the challenges that you face, because you put them there. It's a good stance. You put them there for your learning, and so that you can do better and evolve.
Right, and so that's individually and collectively. On some level, we've intended this planet we have right now with this horrendous polarity, this dichotomy, and this hierarchical system. So once we grasp that we intended this on some level, we can take back our reality and change it. Because I don't like this program. What about you? Go ahead. Why don't you two, you and Michael, start a little bit, because you're aware of this topic on another level than I am, and perhaps Dr. Lessin is, and then we will come in periodically and add our 2 cents. So who wants to start, Michael or Clay?
It's all good. Clay, you want to take it?
Sure. I was involved in some of the last, group projects that Light Physics had, and so I did have, some of the Anunnaki engagements. But I guess if I had to say what my expertise would be in, it would probably be in when I first started. When I first started engaging with a lot of light physics practices via meditations, I found out, and intoning, these intoning meditations, I found out that I had an extremely high sensitivity to chi, or to prana, in my body system. And most people's, I'm just kind of going into a direction, so correct me if get off on a tangent. But so most people's central nervous systems are pretty neglected, and they don't get a lot of exercise. So just like any muscle, your nervous system has these pathways that start to shut down as you get older. And so chi doesn't flow to those areas anymore. So when I started doing these meditations, I started feeling, for example, when I first started doing this stuff, my feet would be numb, absolutely numb after the end of a meditation, and I wasn't able to, I literally couldn't walk. It was like both my feet and my shins had fallen asleep. And I noticed that after I did this for a long period of time, over months and months and months and months, that it finally started to kind of creep in. This warm, gassy, liquidy feeling would creep into the bottom of my feet, and then finally it would start to go through my legs and up into my abdomen and through my heart and up into my head and neck. And so that was my first experience, and I realized that it was not only very real, because I had never experienced this before, but it was also something that is directly connected to your emotional responses when you feel inspired and that type of thing. But most people's body systems, like when you're about to get in a car wreck and you slam your brakes on before you hit the car in front of you, you feel this huge sink of heat that pours off of you, and you usually sweat. Like if you get nervous, you sweat, that type of thing. Well, usually that's because...
Clay, does it make any difference where you are while you're meditating, if you're in a sacred area or in the woods, or does it matter where you are doing this meditation?
Yeah, so there's different names for it. I know Life Physics Group uses the term the vacuum. Dan Winter uses the term quantum foam. Nikola Tesla used the term radiant energy, the ether, universal life force. But it's just the world, the earth works very similar to just like a human body. And so there are pockets all over, just like blood vessels, if you want to call it that where the vacuum density, the vacuum is more dense in particular areas. So that density allows for more information access at that point. And in a non-local environment, when we talk about holographic, if you think of a non-local environment being that you're not actually separate from anything, you're just kind of a bunch of compressed waves that are geometrically compressed together, and you have intention. That's why like an atom is almost completely empty space. It's almost 100% empty space. It looks solid to us, but we just basically have immersed ourselves into a spectrum of awareness that makes things look and feel very, very dense and solid. But if you're aware of like Einstein, for example, he and Bose, they did an experiment called the Bose-Einstein condensates, and it was proof that two electrons could communicate on opposite ends of the Earth instantaneously. There wasn't any delay in their response to one another, and we work the exact same way. We just we are in a period where you have so much belief systems and you have so much programming that surrounds kind of like a mind virus that tells you that you're not good enough, you're worthless, you have all these fears that actually affect your resonance in the environment. So that's a big part of it. Meditation, the reason meditation is so important is because over time it starts to shave away a lot of these belief systems and personality flaws that we have. And when that starts to subside like an onion, these layers of programming start peeling away like an onion. And as they do, you start to notice a lot of the desires that you've had and wants, and they just become really not very important anymore. But in that same process, you also develop a very intimate relationship with your local environment, whether it's conscious to you or not. But it's not just people that you affect. You affect when you start to go through, like AR talks about your cells as you meditate over long periods of time. One cell in the body can absorb, over a volt of charge, and you're made of trillions of these cells. Well, that's essentially like a battery that starts to desulfate over time. Thomas Bearden and John Bedini, they're engineers and an engineer for for the Army for a long period of time. Thomas Bearden was a lieutenant colonel, but he also disseminated a lot of advanced physics research, and he was showing the same thing. You could take a negative charge and you could put it into a sealed lead-acid battery that was dead, like your car battery after 6 years, it finally won't take a charge anymore. But if you trickle charge a negative charge into it, polarity reverse charger, over time it will take the electrolytes and plates inside the battery, and it'll actually give them a refreshed response. So they'll actually get more charge over time. But not only that, but once that sealed lead-acid battery is desulfated, it'll have in many cases 5, 6, 7, 8 times the power density output. So it actually put out more charge. If you took like a 35 amp sealed lead acid battery and it's dead, it'll now put out 65, 75 amps once it's been reconditioned to be resonant. It's been resonant with a negative charge. It'll output a larger charge. So your body cells work the exact same way. Your body works like a big battery with a bunch of sulfated capacitors. And you could think of like your chakras, if you wanted to think of a chakra, think of it as like one chakra is a capacitor that's clogged up and it's sulfated. And then as you start to take charge on over long periods of time negatively, then these things will start to pulsate and start to put out more charge. Well, that charge that you output starts to affect your local reality more overtly. You become more highly resonant with your localized environment. And that was one thing that AR and I talked about, was that Anunnaki have, of course, they have such large cellular capacitance. Their cells can hold such a large amount of charge. They are able to affect their reality more overtly and immediately than we are, because we are covered with belief systems about how things are so fixed in our real world. But at the same time, we have such a low cellular capacitance. There's different types of chi, by the way. So there's chi that goes in your body. There's a couple of forms of that. And there's chi that circulates, that starts from your outer layers of your skin cells. And
the Anunnaki are addicted to gold powder, and I just wonder if that capacitates them more, the fact that they're wired with gold inside.
Well, this is what so you can actually, if you thought of a spectrum, if you think of like a peer-to-peer distributed network, like a computer network, you download torrent files for a movie. So we all work on a particular bandwidth. But the more in love that you are with yourself, and the more in love you are with everything that you're surrounded by, you actually start to increase the bandwidth. You actually, the resolution of the information that's in your local environment. So that shared, AR called it shared distributability. It's just a very complex term to describe a high level of connection to your local environment. And that high level of connectivity starts to accentuate and magnify your local intentions, but it also starts to affect your environment. It affects electrical devices that you're around. It affects computers. It affects battery power in cell phones. I've noticed this. It affects. I have an iPod I've had for 6 or 7 years, and the battery holds a charge like I bought it yesterday. It's brand new. The battery is literally brand new because I wear it on my arm, on my shoulder when I run and jog. And then, so as those batteries and those computers that you're surrounded by, they get kind of acquiesced to that radiance that you put off of your body system, and you have less problems. You have computers that behave, and you don't get viruses in your stuff, and you have cell phone batteries that last long times, and you start to affect anything and everything that your awareness would that would pull into itself. You start to affect people, and even if you don't know it or not, you meet somebody and they just start to really like you and open up to you, and all of a sudden you didn't have to pay to get into the concert, or all of a sudden the bartender buys you drinks. Just weird, just these weird random things. One thing is also because intention, we think of intention, we think of attachment, because like when we discuss something that we would want as an intention, what we don't know is we have all these belief systems and resistances that push us away from the purity of accepting whatever it is that we think we want. So you have to do what's been fabulous for me too is coupling emotional processing with your basic like meditations. And emotional processing is, I think, Sasha, you brought this up a while ago, is when you have a problem and you have an emotional trigger that comes up from that, that's basically, you're being given information about yourself that you need to look at. And you actually receive this particular amount of charge, emotional charge, based on the extremity of the situation, whether it's a car wreck or you get in a fight with your girlfriend or whatever. And so you have about 90 seconds, maybe 4 or 5 minutes, that charge stays with you and it's the strongest. And that's the best opportunity, because when you're mad, if you can take the time to stop and sit down in a chair and let your body go completely relaxed, you actually start to feel that charge be absorbed back into your body, and it will move, and it will actually be felt as chi. It will move inside your body, and particular things will. You have, Life Physics Group, they thought they considered matter to be bitemplaic, meaning that in the vacuum, in the subquantum place where there's no space, no time, you have an optimal template. You have your own perfect body. And all the conditioning, belief systems, and lack of awareness and presence, it misaligns you over time in the physical. So you become unaligned with your optimal template. So as you start to do this work, you start to kind of realign yourself back with your optimal self, and your cells and your heart and your body systems, your central nervous system, they all start to function more optimally, and you start to output more charge. And this charge is what Life Physics Group called manifest production observership. It was just a very complicated term to describe that intention becomes magnified and finally becomes conscious. So you're able to affect your local reality in a conscious way, and the less attachment that you have to the outcome, the more fluid and less time differentiated the result becomes. So time speeds up. Your intentions speed up. The less attachment you have to the outcome, and that's what that's what we call it MPO in life physics, or Leon was. Okay. Sorry, I'm kind of.
There's a lot of information.
Great.
I want to digest this a little bit, and so let's all comment on what was just said, so it goes in. I mean, my head's buzzing right now. Like, this is phenomenal. Mike, would you like to just address to what was just said?
Sasha, you want to go? Because what I want to get into, what Clay just brought up, I would like to get into that, but it'll get into a whole other subject, so I wanted to hear your thoughts.
Oh, sure. I love the system that you've outlined, this understanding how unconscious intentionality becomes conscious allows you to manifest so that you're in the present. I look at wanting as being as always being contrafactual, and so what I find really interesting is that the parts that are taking you from a direct appreciation have some inner need. If you keep saying, why do you want that, and what do you really need, eventually you get to something that is ecological for the person and the society and the universe.
And I just want to go,
Yeah.
I want to hear more about this, but I just want to summarize a little bit that we were talking about coupling emotional processing when you get a emotional stimulant. See, correct me if I'm getting this wrong, okay? When you're getting some kind of response to perhaps something that makes you angry or afraid, that you are actually being given information about yourself, and that you have somewhere your own perfect template, and you can realign back with your optimal self and your perhaps health and youth and vitality and all those things that may be missing. I want to learn more about that one and how to do that, because there's another person that calls it quantum leaping, that you have your optimal self and that you can somehow access or realign with that perfect version of yourself. And Peter Smith of the Dr. Michael Newton Institute said that we can access ourselves in our various timelines. So you can go back and comfort your 5-year-old who had a rough time getting through something, and you can go talk to your 75, or if you're older, your 80-year-old that has some wisdom for your 60-year-old self. So that might be what you're saying there, and I'd like to learn more about that. And then
Michael knows about.
Yeah, go ahead.
Michael knows a lot about this stuff. I've seen him post on Facebook that you have all these experiences that you've had, say, in a different body, but they're kind of happening all at the same time.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that's really you have all these traumas that you have kind of imprinted on you when you're born, and even before you're born, even while you're in the womb. So this is just my personal experience, but you're able to go via intention, and you can actually put your focus on these timelines where you have received these types of trauma. And these trauma could be from being birthed, when you have to go through circumcision and getting oxygen deprived when they cut your umbilical cord prematurely during birth. These things are extremely traumatic, and they're done. They're done deliberately, and they're done because you have these sectioned off blockages that for lack, like chakras, for example, become blocked because of that birthing process. So you have to look at those traumas and welcome them in, and you have to really send a lot of focused love and attention to yourself and also to your parents. One exercise in meditation I've done where you kind of sit there with you're holding yourself as a child, and then also you're surrounded by your parents, because your parents have gone through so much trauma and pain and suffering, and they've kind of relayed that to you as how the world works, whether they did that consciously or not. If you're a particular vibration, you just pass that on. Even if they never spoke to you, you still get it. So this compassion, love, and forgiveness is so important to send to your younger self at particular times when you've absorbed these traumas, and also to your parents, because you need that. You need that. That's essentially, from my experience, is it's trapped energy. It's just blocked, and you develop these emotional responses to being insulted or cut off in traffic. All those are protections that you put on yourself to help you deal with all that pain and suffering. So when somebody makes you mad, it's not actually it's not a bad thing. It's actually the most optimal environment for evolving at that point in time. It's actually a gift. It's just very, very hard for us to see it as that in the moment. If we have the wherewithal to sit down when we're mad and meditate on it and welcome it in, for me, I have such huge physiological effects from going through the process. I feel chi move through my body. My heart opens and pumps, and it goes up into my head, and I'm so sensitive to that it's almost like it's a perfect opportunity to sit and work on my chi development if I get mad or if I get in an argument or something. Otherwise, we kind of have disassociation. So as soon as we get to fight, the first thing we want to do is avoid that person, play video games, play guitar, do something to take our minds off of what just occurred, when it's the last thing that we should be doing. We should be looking directly at it and wondering what we can do. It's a part of yourself that you really are supposed to be looking at, and it'll just keep happening until you take a look at it.
Right. So no one else can really make you mad. It's just a stimulus of something that perhaps was said or something that happened that gives you the reflection back to yourself, and you can use that as an opportunity to heal your own trauma and not project it out and blame or shame someone else, but take personal responsibility for your emotional response to an external stimuli. Correct?
You hired them to touch you off.
You basically, my understanding is basically you did. You have these agreements when you come in to this body. This is just my own personal theory, and so the only way that you get to move up to a different level is by absorbing a lot of these triggers. Right on. These booby traps.
That's why we fight, honey. Yay!
God is a mathematician. Everything balances.
Yeah, and I didn't want to get off too far down. Michael had brought up 432 hertz, and the Pythagorean tuning, and a lot of these frequencies that are intoned, the human body they already carry in the human voice. So when you meditate and you do an om, these types of frequencies, the vowel sounds, essentially are touching on the different frequency pathways that would incorporate the 432 spectrum. So it's not like it's dire that you sing the absolute perfect frequency of that or a perfect fourth up or that, but just the oming, just I can feel resonates my whole body system, and I've unlocked a bunch of blockages just from meditating and doing that. But sound during meditation is huge. If you intone when you meditate, it's your cells just sing. They sing because they get to absorb charge when you do that. If you do it long enough, you'll start to feel the effects, and you'll wonder why you never. It's kind of like discovering you have a different sense that you never knew you had. It's like,
very cool. I'm going to do that with my yoga tomorrow morning. Thank you. Make this happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just met a Shinto priest. His name was Hideo, and he told me the most beneficial thing we could do was to sing tone every morning. And specifically 432, he said that's God's frequency. This guy's so cute. He's like 80 years old, and he's just so full of chi. But I think the whole thing with 432, I think it's a great way to get into this and explain to the listeners why it's important. And I think really to get into it, we need to touch on sacred geometry, which is you kind of find out it's kind of like finding the fingerprint of the Creator. You find out everything from an atom to galaxies are adhering to the exact same precise geometry, and that's why it's called sacred. And this gets into, if people want to look into Pythagoras, the Fibonacci sequence, the golden mean. But so you start to find out, certain geometry is formed. But now to get into cymatics, it's a brand new scientific line of inquiry, and they have equipment that makes sound visible for the first time. It's making the invisible visible. And it started off with just having a big old metal plate, and they put sand on it, and it would be tuned. They'd have a bow, and you could see the sand dance, and it would take on geometry. And that kind of evolved to the point where they'd use a big vat of water and have it suspended in a big tripod, and so no vibrations could get through it. And then they would just have a waveform generator. And the easiest way for someone that's not a musician is, say you're in your car and you go to sweep through your radio dial, right? And you're going from low frequencies to high. And you're going up, and all of a sudden you start to tune into a station. And there's more of a signal until you got the strongest signal possible. And then as you start going up, there's going to be more noise added into the signal until you're total noise again, and then there's going to be another station. Similarly, it's the same with frequency and when geometry forms. So without even knowing the most harmonious cosmic frequencies, you could just take one of these scientific devices, start going through a frequency sweep, and just note where geometry is formed. Because if you think about it, you know, those frequencies where geometry forms is what's going to be adhering this universe together, because everything is made from sacred geometry. And one of the leaders in this field is John Stuart Reed. He formed a company called Cymatics, and he actually created the scientific equipment. And I just want to share what he said about this, because it gets into your cells, as Clay was saying, as this capacitor of chi, or electrical capacitance within the body. He says 432 hertz is a harmonic of light frequency. And what that is, for real, 432 squared is the speed of light. And we'll get into later why that's so important with some crop circles that just showed up. But it says 432 speaks or resonates directly with our cells. All cells communicate with each other via infrared light. So I imagine that when they receive music in 432 hertz, they are in joy. The conscious mind may not be aware of this, but most of what goes on in our bodies is subconscious. Thankfully, you can read more about sounds and just check out Cymatics. One more thing I want to share is, Clay, you might be interested in this. I hired this company, Cymatics, to image my own guitar recorded in my studio. It was my Joe Satriani amp, actually. I got to tell him that his amp was involved in something cool. But
nice.
I recorded my guitar at 432, and I sent it to the Cymatics, and they imaged it, and they were flabbergasted. They said they've imaged most everything known to man, dolphins and everything else, but they had never imaged an electric rock guitar. And they said maybe it's the tubes that did it, you know, because what the tubes are doing to the sound. But I released that image. I don't know if you've seen it, but I'll make sure you see it.
I have seen it, yeah. I've seen your post.
It's beautiful,
it's really cool. It's very cool, yeah.
Well, Nassim Haramein took it under his wing, which is, you know, a lot of people know him as like a really famous astrophysicist. But he said universal tuning to 432 hertz makes sense because it creates such an incredible resonance naturally in the structure of space, as evidenced by this image of a 432 frequency being played into a fluid medium, water, and imaged, a process known as cymatics. The story of how we all ended up tuning the note to A equals 440 hertz is a long one with many different factors coming into play, which I'd love to get into that, which I'm sure we're going to. The point is to move forward with our new knowledge of physics, frequency, vibration, and the universe in general, and work towards increasing coherency and resonance by tuning our minds and literally our instruments in music to naturally occurring, highly resonant frequencies. And I thought that was beautiful because it really starts to tell you which frequencies are going to communicate with your cells, you know, and that's a whole, like, it's hidden knowledge. I don't think that we're just kind of rediscovering it as we speak. So I just wanted to get into that, you know, what cymatics was, why 432 is important, and by the way, using this exact same scientific equipment, if you put an A equals 440 hertz through it, which is our today's musical standard, it creates no geometry. It just looks like a puddle. Back it off 8 cents, which isn't a lot in the bigger picture of things, but on the scale of manifestation, it's everything, because it's almost like you just take a focus on a camera and it just comes into perfect focus when you hit 432.
Yeah, no, definitely. Actually, I started a band here about 2 months ago, and so aside from us, we have a keyboard player, so it's kind of hard to tune down. But we tuned the 432 until we brought in a keyboard player, and he can't detune his keyboard. But he just ordered a new synth, I think, that will allow him to. But yeah, and that's also why, you know, Michael, that's why a lot of guitar players they actually tune down a half step, you know, from they think it's just it gives more relief to the string, but actually there's a tonal reason for it, like everything from like Nuno Betancourt and Eric Gales, Steve Ray Vaughan, Eddie Van Halen. A lot of these guys tune down a half step.
There's a huge list.
A huge list that goes on. Yeah, and it's because, it's a little easier for them to play, but they get relief in the string, but it's also more tonally satisfying. So I play 432 on my stuff until I have to tune up to a keyboard or a piano, for example.
Well, let me ask you,
did
you have
absolutely.
any experiences when you were playing in 432?
Well, when I say experience, 432 is so Rich Merrick put out he has a website, I can't remember what, but he actually put out he's got some free ebooks on his website. I can't remember the name of the site. I can pull it up here. But he actually did a study with some other guys on 432, and he took a perfect fourth, which was a 432 and up a perfect fourth would be like a D, A, and a D note, played it simultaneously, and it has a particular geometric pattern that it makes, and then he took an axial view of a strand of DNA, where you look down on it, not the double or triple helix that we're used to looking at, but if you look top down like a tube, the geometry is almost identical.
Wow.
Identical. And also to take into consideration that 432, when you see those geometric shapes forming in your sand as a cymatic geometry, think of that, and I know you know this, but I'm just think of that as being three-dimensional. And John Stewart Reed talks about that in length and gives some presentations on that stuff. Is sound is three-dimensional, and it's not a wave, as we've been taught to believe. Sound doesn't function as a wave. It functions as a three-dimensional bubble. Now, when you think about that as a bubble, Michael, you and I know about what AR called the thought boundary.
Yeah.
So the thought boundary was what kind of makes up our reality. But when you manifest a physical object with your mind, which is what LPG in part wrote about, the physics behind that, you actually create a small T-boundary, a geometrical construct, a small matrix that's essentially a holding cell for your thought. So whatever goes into that via intention, if you have an active kundalini, you can bring this charge up through your chakras. It will spit out of your forehead, it'll spit out of your heart and out of your gut, your enteric brain, out of your gut or sacral chakra. When those things spit out or squirt into this held alpha location, or a place where your thought is held, a T-boundary is formed, and that's where it's an extremely optimal environment to help allow the vacuum to power up, bleed into 3D reality, and create the object that you want to create. And so when you talk about 432, you can think of it as geometrical, a three-dimensional matrix where intention gets created, basically. And if you think about I don't know if you guys have talked about the heartbeat that surrounds the Earth, the Schumann resonance. It's this big electromagnetic pulse. Anyway, yes. I don't know. Have you talked about this on the show at all?
Good now. Go ahead.
Okay, so you have this, and I know Michael knows this stuff, so please, Michael, I'm kind of.
Oh no, I'm having a ball listening to you explain it. You have a great way of communicating this information, so please keep on.
Okay, thanks, man. So the Earth has this pulse, this electromagnetic pulse it's a standing wave pulse. It's about 7.8 hertz. It's around the same pulse that your heartbeat puts out when you're meditating, by the way. But this electromagnetic field that surrounds the Earth, we know it as like an ionosphere. It's what our radio waves travel through when they get through the airwaves and that type of thing. But it's also a big hard drive. And any thought or any imaginative thought that you've had gets put in this thing. So that's where manifestation becomes possible. It's not that you have an original thought. You don't. You're sharing collective thoughts with everybody on the planet. So you have an individual desire, but you have a collective observed reality, and that's where you get all your hard physics from. We collectively observe this wall to be real and hard, and so if we punch it in Thailand, it's going to hurt. If we punch it in Russia, it's going to hurt. So this collectively observed rule book for how reality is going to function, that's basically what we live in. But we have access to this hard drive. It's a quantum hard drive. Anything that we envision in our minds immediately exists. It just hasn't been given enough energy and fixed observation to actually manifest in the physical. You need a little bit more mental clarity and discipline to be able to make that happen. We do it all the time. You're always creating, but your programming and belief systems keep circulating the same emotional responses to lack, guilt, fear, worthlessness, all those types of programs that we have that don't allow us to, say, win a lottery ticket or, have the perfect dream job or whatever it is that we think that we want. But this hard drive is where everything is stored. Everything on this planet is stored there. And if we have more a clarified awareness, more presence, then we have access. We have better access, or we have more shared distributability in connection with that quantum hard drive that basically contains any thought or any observed thing or experience that we want to have. But that's where the emotional processing and meditation regularly is so important. At least for me, it has been, because I've gotten to witness these things come into reality that weren't supposed to happen, or and Michael talks about this in depth. His I think it's so awesome, his Steve Vai experience, because I grew up listening to Steve Vai. That was essentially a creative, passionate desire, and also one thing that makes these things happen more regularly is if you have a creative expression or a creative endeavor that's not just so, I need money, I need this, I need a car. If it's an expression, those things come to you more efficiently and in a more time-efficient way, because it's an alignment with your true nature. The fear-based wants and needs are something that you typically push away. When you say, I want more money because I don't have enough, you're essentially pushing it further and further and further away. But if you have a creative endeavor, these are the things where you'll notice synchronicities are induced. Experiences come to you more quickly via this subquantum hard drive that you're immersed in, because it's not a desire based in lack. It's a desire based on the creative nature that you are infinitesimally, basically. It's your soul nature, if you want to call it that. That's why we like and do particular things as hobbies, whether we collect stamps or play music. These things all give us joy, real joy, and we have a loving affinity for them. And that's why if we put our intention on those types of things, we get them more quickly.
Right on.
Wow. Is that the morphogenic field that Sheldrake talks about, or is that something different?
I would think of it as the same thing. Yeah, it's just we have a species, we have a shared distributability, and also a collective observed reality. But we also, like Rupert Sheldrake talks about, a morphogenetic resonance with our whole species, and that's what AR talks about, or used to talk about, was the 100th monkey rule, the 3% rule, was that when you're outputting more charge, say at a cellular level, you start to affect your reality, your local reality. But because there's no absolute separation between you and any being on the planet, anything for that matter, you start to affect, that's if you want to go into the negative aspect of our being here, the reason that these powers that be want to control us is because some Anunnaki, I don't know the whole story behind them, but I know, they don't have these deeper, more emotive means of expressing love. And if you think about it from a computer network standpoint, peer-to-peer distributed network, your bandwidth cuts off at a particular, it has a cap. It's kind of like your radio station knob only goes to one end and to the other end, or we can only hear 20 hertz to 20 hertz. But love speeds up that connectivity, in magnitudes that I have no idea, that are inconceivable, but you become so in alignment with your local environment, but you're shareable. You're like a shareable wave. And so the more in love you are with yourself and the local environment, that's the 3% rule. That's when you start affecting large segments of the population. And Sheldrake talks about this morphogenetic resonance with, say monkeys, or trying to figure out how to do something. One or two figure it out, and it starts to seep and bleed out over to the other rest of the populations. And we work the exact same way, which is why self-work, I think, is so important, because you're not just affecting yourself. And if you do it enough, you'll actually start to witness your effect with other people. You'll do a meditation, and you'll step out and go to the grocery store, and you'll just have this weird harmonic experience with the people that in the line. You'll have the cashier, you'll affect people that are in bad moods. They'll all of a sudden become more neutral and less attached. You'll be around family members that you typically maybe you have problems with, and all of a sudden it's just, you can allow them to be themselves, and they allow you to be yourself. And it starts to smooth off a lot of the personality flaws and problems that you have with other people, because they come into contact with you. And just like Michael said, these frequencies that we're all made of, that we have this innate knowing. We all know what love is and how it feels. And so you start to kind of emanate a particular type of feeling to people. It's kind of like when you meet a friend, you meet a stranger, but you've also met strangers that you're just weirdly attracted to. You just feel very welcomed by. You get pulled over, you don't get speeding tickets. A policeman will come up to your car, and all of a sudden you've gotten 7 warnings in a row from speeding. People just, there's some homeliness or something that's familiar about this feeling that people have when they are around you. And music is the same way. Michael knows this really well. Music just connects all people. I lived in Thailand last year for 4 months, and I traveled with Benoit Carpin. I think he was on your show. And my wife, and we had such great experiences traveling around Thailand and Laos and Cambodia. But it was just wild being in environments where nobody spoke the languages together, but you could sit down and play guitar with somebody, and all of a sudden you were just all connected. It was just that music and reality creation are the same thing. And that's where AR Bordon talked about sound is not, it's not, you can't differentiate it from sono-bioelectrogravitic energy or just vacuum-oriented charge that comes into the environment. That's what music is, and that's what we're made out of. We're made out of music. That's what Cymatics is. It's charged music. We're made out of this. Sorry.
No, it's all good. I just wanted to add, I've heard the universe is being sung into existence,
Yeah, I totally agree that, yeah.
I heard the first song was Talk About Cannon. That's what I got it downloaded. It said the very first song was Talk About Cannon.
Talk about what?
Very weird, but I just here. Talk about Cannon.
Oh, Cannon. Oh, yeah, right.
I got a download one time, and they said that was the first song. And that's how we got sung into existence. It was just a weird thing, and I went, really? But anyway, putting it out there. Who created the 440 hertz system in the first place? Was that a Illuminati agenda to, keep us out of frequency? And
Michael knows all about this stuff.
Huh?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I know we're getting to the top of the hour. Maybe in the next hour we can get into the topic of why we were taken out of 432, because you'll find out a lot of ancient cultures knew to have their instruments tuned to 432, and there used to be some Eastern cultures that actually there was one person, it was their job to go out into the kingdom and make sure everyone's instruments were tuned properly. But in the 1940s, we were taken out of that standard and put into 440. And I've learned some really interesting things, but I think we're at the top of the hour, so we can get into that.
Okay, well, we don't really have a break unless you want to take one, and I do
perfect. I don't need a break.
You don't need a break? Okay, well, we can just keep on going.
I'm good.
Michael, you can run to the bathroom and come back.
Yeah, if anybody needs to take a break, go for it. But that would be a good
I'm actually fine.
Oh, cool.
Okay, it would be kind of good to go into the, how the dark thoughts create this negative reality that we seem to be sharing, which involves the Illuminati control, and that probably was, I don't know, Marduk, who was running the show for all these years and created this whole Illuminati paradigm that we have right now that is so hierarchical and patriarchal that it just cuts out half of humanity and puts 90%, 95%, 99% of us into a slave-type system, and how we can shift that. That's something I'm putting on the table for discussion. What do you guys think? I'm the only woman here, by the way. Go ahead.
Well, I think it's very important to start using these cosmic harmonious frequencies, like Clay was saying, in our own private meditation practices. I can share one of the easiest ways I've found is to get a crown chakra Tibetan singing bowl. They're the ones that are smaller, about the size of just a soup bowl. And what you'll find is they're all tuned to 432, which is really interesting. And I heard they do it just by intuition, which is mind-blowing. But it's an easy way while you meditate to get the bowl to sing, and then you can chant with it and know you're perfectly in 432. And once you do that enough, I'm finding out you can get muscle memory of what it feels like to sing 432. And imagine the power of being able to mentally hum 432 internally, maybe not even vocalize it. I think it's better if you actually get the frequencies going through your body. But there's a lot of things you can do, and I think a new technology is here, even for healing. I take a little bit of water and I put it in a singing bowl at the bottom and get it to sing and, pump that frequency through it and then drink it. Or you can just put it right on someone's third eye, physically rest it on their forehead, and get the bowl to sing, and you're pumping 432 directly into their body. Even, being a musician, if you tune your acoustic guitar to 432, first of all, I heard that you'll gain about 1/3 volume. There's more detail in the signal. If there's more geometry, there's more information.
Yeah, you get more harmonics off the string, too.
Yeah, dude. When I tuned my guitar down to 432, and for the recording for Cymoscope to do that cymatic imaging, I noticed right away it was like there's a symphony playing with me, man. There's all these beautiful overtones that they're just not there in 440,
Yeah. You also, because I was a session guitar player for a long time, and I noticed that you turn out the lights and you sit there and track stuff over and over. But if you tune to 432, you actually get, like in musician, like in sports, you call it getting into the zone. Mm-hmm. But if you're tuned to 432, if you're like improvising or something, you'll actually get into the zone way more quickly playing with that tuning. That's just my personal experience with it.
Yeah, what blows my mind too is I've seen some recent videos of people being inside the pyramids and chanting in specific frequencies, and it sounds like there's a symphony singing with them. It's one of the most beautiful ethereal sounds I've ever heard. So it's interesting. I don't know if you know this, Clay, but due to you actually inspiring me to look into the subject of 432, that led to all these things. But one of the recent things that I've been finding out, well, first of all, we need to explain to people, for 432 hertz, when you're dealing, first of all, a hertz is only how many times a wave is oscillating up and down. So 1 hertz would just be 1 cycle. If there's 432 hertz, it's 432 cycles within 1 second is all that's happening. But when you're any frequency where you are, to go 1 octave lower, you just divide it by 2. So it'd be 216 hertz is 1 octave below 432. And so 216 and 216 is 432. Similarly, the next 2 octaves down is 108 hertz, because 108 and 108 is 216. 216 and 216 is 432. And going down further, you get the 54, which is 3 octaves below A 432, and then 27 hertz. And what I've been finding out is it started with understanding that 2 crop circles that showed up. One was encoded in binary in 2010, and what was encoded in it was E equals MC squared. And that's kind of fascinating in itself, that why they would be communicating that. But through today's most cutting-edge physics, quantum physics, we know that everything that exists, it exists both as a particle and a wave. If you think of E equals MC squared, it's really only the particle part of the equation, but it's mass, the M is mass. And so what I found out is there is an encoded frequency component to that, and that is C, because C in the E equals MC squared is the speed of light. 432 squared is the speed of light within 1% accuracy. And this E equals MC squared was based on a 36 hertz cymatic image, which falls into this 432 grid when you look at how all the other notes fall out of when you're tuned to 432. The following year, in 2011, there was an actual crop circle that showed up that was encoded in binary code, ASCII, and it said IA space Inky. And that one had a 7-pointed star, which I found out is created by the 27 hertz, which you see it's directly related to 432 tuning.
Cool.
And it's kind of mind-blowing. And then you find out that 7-pointed star that is there is Babylonia. The Babylonian world map is put onto a 7-pointed star. I've been spending a lot of time with Native American Indian elders, and they call it the 7 directions. And they have a whole teaching method that is based around the 7-pointed star. And one of their elders, his name is Bear Cloud, he said when humanity discovers that the 7-pointed star can reproduce itself fractally, backwards and forwards perfectly, that humanity will move into a new, better time. It's leading, because what you see now is if E equals MC squared and C is 432 squared, the only frequencies that you can plug into that equation are going to be ones that are 432 based, because it is a component of light. And so what I've been finding out is these earth mounds all through Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New York mostly. It's Ohio mostly. I'm just saying that these 3 states have a large amount of these earthworks. They all encode these most harmonious numbers. Like if you think of 108 or 216, it could be represented as 1080 or 2160. A lot of these walls will be 2160, like 2,160 feet long. Another wall will be 1,080. I guess what I'm trying to get at is for a very long time, it seems like even our counting system that was given to the Sumerians and still used by humanity, and the whole thing of basing geometry and stuff on a 360-degree system, they've been trying to guide us into this topic for a very long time. I'm hearing really something strange. Do you hear that?
Oh, I'm sorry, that was me.
Yours?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was my headset. My headset was jiggling, so I had to. Yeah.
Oh,
we're
no
we're
worries.
good. Yeah, no, I totally agree, Michael. I haven't, as far as the Anunnaki thing, I just don't have as much exposure to that, and I haven't had the impulse, I guess, to really dig into that. But at the same time, when we did a lot of the experiments that and you've talked about this stuff on some shows before, some of the life physics group exercises that we did as smaller groups towards the very end of the I guess LPG organization, I guess.
Indeed.
I had very real interfacing experiences, and real data, real actualized data came back through that. But I know that it's kind of like it's so difficult I know there's some sort of law of non-interference that comes from these interfacings, and so they want you to come to your own conclusion, and at the same time they want to help, and so it seems to be very difficult for us to kind of get that, and it's almost trying to like work with your subconscious. There are a lot of things your subconscious wants you to learn about, but we're just on automatic pilot. We kind of turn that stuff off. But yeah, it's 432. Oh, and one thing I was going to say is Wesley Bateman. Do you remember much of this stuff through AR? Wesley Bateman and J.J. Hurtak and some other guys, they went out and did white noise studies on like 200 different Mayan temples, the pyramids of Giza, Cheops, all over the world, over 200 of these things. White noise analysis is basically you take like a 360-degree speaker, and you put it in the middle of the room. And then what it does is it puts out this, and a computer basically analyzes the most resonant frequencies that get bounced around inside that room. So it scatters out all frequencies and just sees what the most predominant ones are. And out of all these different temples, and the exact same frequencies were predominant, and they were predominating, and they were based on 432 hertz.
Oh, wow.
So it's absolutely nothing new. It's just new to us. But like you, Michael, like you said before, it's been utilized for ages. But it's just really cool to see that type of validation. And there was actually a lot of talk I've read that some of these chambers were actually healing centers. You'd go in and they'd put you in a sarcophagus of some kind, and you'd be they would isolate you in the sarcophagus, and they would have some sort of frequency played or an intonement, where they'd get all in a circle, and they'd use a particular amount of people in the circle, which is where they understood that intention was geometric, and that a particular amount of people in a circle, a specific number of people, all with a shared intention, would accelerate their intention once it was collectively observed. And that's where a lot of these Tibetan monks and other sects and orders and groups, Freemasonry and Rosicrucianism and Knights of Malta and Kabbalists and, Satanists, a lot of these guys all know this information, and they know how to collectively observe something into being. These sex rituals where they have a surround people in cloaks, they have a focused intention, and then the people in the middle that are having sex together, for example, they help raise each other's kundalini, and when they do that, they're essentially manifesting something that they've all agreed upon into reality.
That's what we've done in a lot of our tantric rituals, is you setting an intention. And one of the things I noticed when we were doing the sacred sector stimulation of the goddess, which in some case was me, and this is a positive tantric ritual to bring about the transformation of the planet into a positive timeline type of thing, is that if I was playing music, even though it was very spiritual and uplifting, it was blocking the, I think it's because it was in the 440 instead of the 432. That's probably what was going on. And I would say, just shut off the music, and then I was able to go through all my kundalini and have the experience of a kundalini awakening.
Okay, yeah.
Your Wayne, the woman wants what she wants.
No, I noticed there was an interference. There was music playing, And when I played my own song, which was, the orgastic sounds of joy, that I was able to go through and into the cosmos and have the ecstatic experience. And just putting it together, as you're talking about, I think that the music was at the wrong tone, the wrong frequency. And that's what was blocking. If I played any background music, it was blocking. And they might say, shut off the music, There I would go, traveling through the cosmos.
Yeah. You know what I'd love to add to this is, why 440, And I found out something very interesting. I came into contact. He's one of my best friends now, but he is an Arcturian contactee, and a famous musician, by the way, too. And we were talking specifically about 440 versus 432. And he said, Michael, you know how we've been guided into understanding that the proper first way of dividing a unit, either multiplying or dividing, is 12. And you look at how 12 is encoded into our matrix, 12 months, 12 hours of the clock, 12 o'clock midday or midnight, 12 days of Christmas. It just goes on, 12 tribes of Israel, just on and on and on. He said, well, what happens if you divide 440 by 12? And what happens is you get 36.66666666666, which is interesting. And he said, wow, 440 hertz is pretending to be sacred geometry. 440 is the closest one can come to the real thing while still being an imposter. I thought that was very important. And then he said, well, what happens when you divide 432 by 12? And anyone can do this. It ends up being a perfect 3-6. And if you recall, like all the 432 octaves, they all equal 9. 4, 3, and 2 equals 9. 2, 1, 6, 9. 108, 9. 54, 9. 27, 9. Well, 3 and 6 is 9 as well. And so 432 and 369 are two ways of expressing the same thing, the real thing. And this gets into Tesla. He said if we understood the magnificence of 3, 6, and 9, that we would unlock the keys of the universe. But it was interesting because I asked Chief Golden Light Eagle. He's an ancient alien star and real awesome dude. He's taken me under the wing of these elders and asked me to start speaking at the Star Knowledge conferences. But I asked him, what do the Native American Indians have their instruments tuned to? And he said 444. And I thought that was really interesting. He said that is an Arcturian frequency. And he said, Michael, you need to look into 444 and how it relates to 528. And I thought, well, okay. I didn't really know how. But I started thinking what this Arcturian man said, to take whole numbers and times 12, right? Well, if 36 times 12 is 432, if you go to the next whole number, 37 times 12 is 444. That was interesting enough, but what you'll find when you start looking into these frequencies, it seems like there's two camps kind of branching off, and one camp says 528 is the magical key, and some people say no, it's 432, and they think like the other camp is wrong. But if you keep using this exact same method of just taking whole numbers, like I said, 37 times 12 is 444. Keep going until you get to 44 times 12 is 528. And if you keep going to 55 times 12, you'll get to 660. And why 660 is really important is, again, in these earthworks all through Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New York, the circumferences of the circles in these earthworks, most of them are 660 feet. It's incorporating two totally different systems of frequency and knowledge into these earth mounds, one based on, because right here, within a few number sequences, you got 432, 444, and 528. They're not in competition with one another. They're perfect musical overtones, mathematical overtones of one another, I think it might be pointing us into, because a lot of people know that 528 seems to be working at the level of DNA. So I think it's kind of tuning us into what frequencies do what. If all the creation is being in 432, right, from, everything. But if you want to work at the level of DNA specifically, you switch to 528. I think that is what is being communicated. But I thought that was really interesting, these two different methods, because they're both based. They have a common focal point, which is 432. One is just, So I just wanted to bring that up. I think it's really fascinating, especially getting into why we were taken out of 432 and into 440, and the fact that 440. First of all, I thought it was really interesting that it is the perfect number, 36, but it's taken on the 66666. You know, I'm thinking, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Also, it relates to. It seems like these frequencies are put out there, the call them the dissonant ones, to kind of hold us into a particular pattern. And that's also, I don't know if this is true or not, but the 666 always derives from, in part, and it has all these deep esoteric meanings, but it derives also in part from the carbon molecule, which is the most earthly element, which has 6 neutrons, electrons, and 6 protons. And some talk about if you actually flat pack, if you smash a carbon molecule, if you smash a cube down, which has 6 sides, cube is also representative of Saturn. I know some of these negative groups, they worship Saturn, and I think that's probably because that's where some of these negative entities are from, or maybe it's the actual planet itself. I'm not sure, but it's whatever they're doing to try to hold us into this physical as much as possible, this physical spectrum as much as possible, using these dissonant frequencies and dissonant belief systems and patterns and traumas.
It's really interesting.
That's the importance of 666, which they try to make it satanic. I remember listening to something by Errol the Grey, and she was talking about how they have the grid that's keeping us into this kind of like a prison planet. There was something about part of the grid was Saturn. I've heard that before. Maybe that's not where it came from, but there is some information on that, but I don't have it right in front of me right now. So that's interesting you bring it up.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and I know Rome. Rome was actually called Saturnia before it was called Rome. So it just goes way back, But Michael, I think it's the same, these same groups or ET supported groups that put out these frequencies to try to hold us into particular.
So is it trying to hold it in terms of the Anunnaki? What do you guys think about who has been trying to hold us into this matrix? Was that Marduk? Was it Enlil? What do you think has been going on historically, and has it changed with the return of Manos, right? I don't have the whole thing because I haven't read it yet, but I've been getting reports from Dr. Lessin. What do you guys think about that?
Oh, Michael could probably talk better about this than I could.
The politics of this negative perverted matrix.
As far as I've learned, is Marduk, was sitting at the throne of the Earth throne, But truly, it's his minions who have done this. Because if you look at Marduk, almost playing a role of reflecting back a negative polarity, so they understand thoughts have an electromagnetic energy, and we know energy can't be created or destroyed; it needs to be transmuted. So if you take the idea that thoughts of fear and doubt, they create less geometry. And this is actually kind of proved by Dr. Emoto. When people put out hateful intention and put that to a glass as they froze the water and took a microscope and recorded what happened, it didn't create any geometry. It just looked like sludge. But if someone typed "I love you" or something affirmative, it looked like snowflakes. So take the fact that lower frequencies, lower thought forms of fear and doubt have lesser geometry, and more love-filled has higher. So really no one has asked the question, how do you transmute a negative thought form? And from what I understand, you live it. It comes up in your own reality, hopefully, so you'll choose love over fear, Because if you haven't transmuted it, it'll keep coming up in your life over and over again. And like, this is exactly what you said, Clay. It's like it'll keep happening until you transmute it. you'll say, why does this same thing keep happening to me? It's different people, it's different circumstances, but it's the same experience. It's because you haven't transmuted that thought form of fear into its higher octave. And it was Greg Braden that came up with a brilliant idea. He said, at birth, we're plugged into the mass consciousness through our DNA. But, no one has ever told us what feelings create what geometry. And he said, think of your thought, the waveform attached to it, like if you could see it, like cymatics, kind of. But and you think of DNA as being physical. Overlap the non-physical thought form over top of the DNA, and where there's intersection of the waveform of thought over the physical DNA, that's where the codons in the DNA will form. And so if you have lower fear-based thought forms, there's less geometry, there's less positions in the DNA for codons to form. But when you, AR called it bootstrap evolution, when you start doing your own spiritual homework and weeding the fear-based thought forms out of your own belief system, you're in essence taking control of your own evolution, and you're creating more connection points for codons to even form in your DNA.
Yeah, that's awesome. And also, just like you said, that sacred geometry, if you want to call it that, at a DNA level, the more you increase your resolution of information in your local environment, you're increasing your bandwidth or connectivity to the vacuum. That's, Nassim Haramein talks about this as well, and AR talks about this, but that's where you get information you get information non-locally. So, you're receiving information from outside space-time, comes back into your awareness. And part of the biophysics that AR talked about was that you get this information via your cells that feed into your central nervous system pathways. This information goes up into your right brain hemisphere, and you process this as vibes or gestalts of insight or flashes of inspiration, these types of things. But it's the geometry that you surround yourself with via love accelerates your connectivity to this whole process, and it just steamrolls. Right.
Nassim Haramein said that there's a singularity within each and every one of us, and everything from the molecular and sub-molecular level all the way up to planets and stars and universes. So if you mathematically line these singularities, they are in a straight line, proving that everything is one. And so what we do with our thoughts and deeds goes into the consciousness of the totality of existence and back to us at the speed of light. So if we keep up-leveling our own thought processes, if we notice we have a negative thought, we just change the channel or change the lane into something positive, keep feeding it into the field, the morphogenetic field, then it comes back into us. And that's how we empower ourselves to change the totality of existence. Otherwise, we just remain victims saying, I'm just a little person and I can't do anything. We all can do something, and that's by starting our change within our own lives. And Marianne Williamson said in the Course in Miracles that we start with our own, our own Facebook page right now is what we would call the equivalent. That's our mission. That's who we can reach and talk to those people in our lives. And in the processes like you're talking about, fine-tuning your own feedback from the universe and continually to up-level yourself, that you will gradually change everything and everyone. And that's how we can do this. That's what I'm getting. Gosh, you have words. You're smiling.
Oh, I love you. I'd love to hear you.
Okay.
I love the Course in Miracles part. I love one of the lines in there is divinity is in everything I see.
Yes. So when you pray, it's a form of appreciation. If you appreciate everything in your life, start each morning with a blessing. I'm blessed to be alive. I'm blessed to have a husband. I'm blessed to have a cat. I'm blessed to be living in Maui. I'm blessed to have a house. It brings more and more of those good things into your life, and it's a law of attraction in action.
Indeed. Yeah, I heard gratitude, Actually, you got to really watch your form of prayer because, a lot of people, they'll pray for I need money, what they get is the experience of needing money. Thoughts create reality, literally. And in the same way, I've heard it said that never pray for patience, because all you'll get is situation after situation that try your patience. You got to put out gratitude. You got to put your your mental attention on things in your life that you're grateful for, exactly what you just said, and then see what will manifest. But I think what AR stressed is exactly what we're talking about. Is we've been taught that each one of us is just one little cog in this big machine, and what we do doesn't matter, and it's totally wrong. Once only 3% of a mass consciousness starts resonating more love and higher frequencies, it spreads throughout the whole. Every single one of us has more power than we've ever imagined over this whole creation.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, and sorry?
I just wanted Sasha to share a little bit. He's been too quiet.
Yeah, when I talk, I don't learn anything. It's my chance to listen to you guys.
Okay,
I always
back to
learn
you,
from
Clay.
you, Sasha. Clay, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
If you look at the idea of 440 then as, I guess, kind of putting a governor on our manifestation abilities, when I started uncovering these frequencies, I almost had a fear of releasing them, because I thought, what would happen if, I guess the easiest way, let's just say a really hateful heavy metal band, is communicating really horrible ideas, thought forms, but they're tuned in 432. I thought, is that going to send their information stronger out into the universe? I wanted your thoughts on that.
Yeah, if you think about it from, and I'm just kind of spitballing at the top of my head here, but kind of like, think of 432 and think of even just think of it as love. If you think of they're the same. It's an accelerant of only aligned intention or aligned information, if you will. So in that sense, it gets more difficult to send negative intentions via love. You know what I mean?
They wouldn't be in the vibe. It'd be out of,
it would happen. I think it would dilute the intent.
Right.
Lovingly dilute the intent.
I think Dr. Emoto's work kind of ties into it that, if you have fear-based thought forms, they don't create geometry anyhow. Is what I'm thinking. Reverse it. I think there's a counterfeit. If you'll notice, all these groups, the Satanists and these Illuminati, whatever, just for lack of a better word, Illuminati, and they set up the counterfeit version for everything. They have a counterfeit versions for so chi, money has taken over chi, and governments took over self-responsibility, and it goes on and on and on. And a lot of these friends that I have that are more spiritually connected talk about the counterfeit versions go all the way up the chain. So there's always going to be the fake, the faux idol that they want people to lean more towards, and then the disinformation or the whatever, and it goes the opposite direction. So you can only mimic it to a particular point, and then the purity is unfakeable. So I think what's happening is the reason we're on this radio show and stuff, or this podcast, is because we're being helped along the way. And I think this geometric reality that we're in is flipping, is changing subtly, slowly. We see it slowly. And so these negative aspects that are out there, that we allow to be out there, that we created to be out there, are becoming more and more diluted. That's why you see all these counterfeit systems falling apart, and it's happening because
it's time for them to happen. We're all collectively kind of been there, done that, at least through this cycle, and I think that's one of the reasons why we're accelerating the change by talking about it, but also we kind of have the agreement to have this experience. So we don't want all our problems solved right now because we're still trying to learn. It's kind of like getting a new video game. You ever played like Grand Theft Auto or some of these awesome games? Like they're high production values, they're billion-dollar games. But what if I just gave you all the cheat codes? You know, in some video games they call it God mode, where you enter the little secret code on your keyboard and you can't die, you get all the weapons, and you can fly and walk through walls. And if we got that prematurely, it wouldn't be enjoyable. We need some of that pain and suffering to make it interesting.
That's where we get to the God mode. We realize we created this whole paradigm in the first place so we'd have something to do. It's divine play Leela. When I was on board the mothership when I was about 4.5 years old, I was in my eternal self, and they gave me the decision which multiverse do you want to choose. And I was shown 24 different multiverses, from total the planet blowing up to utopian realities. And I said, give me 3 back from the total utopia, because there wouldn't be enough to do if we had total utopia. And I didn't want the game to be over, but I wanted to have enough things interesting, so that we would have, some food for the grist mill, so that we could learn, evolve, and become co-creators with Source. So it's our negative things that happen a lot of times that give us the motivator to do something different.
That's great.
I just read by Eckhart Tolle, or Tolle, however you pronounce his last name, and it's exactly what we're talking about. He said, is suffering really necessary? Yes and no. If you had not suffered as you have, there would be no depth to you as a human being, no humility, no compassion. You would not be reading this now. Suffering cracks open the shell of ego, and then comes a point when it has served its purpose. Suffering is necessary until you realize it is unnecessary.
Right.
Yeah,
that was
great.
Pretty profound.
The great paradox that we exist in.
So even the Anunnaki suffered. Their planet was dying, and so there was a motivator for them to, reach out into the cosmos, and that's how we came to be. We came here, and they came here, and we became a species because they needed to have a solution for their problems and for their sufferings. It was all good in the divine plan.
I think I should go back to the question you posed in the very beginning about who's in charge and how does that all work. And at a given point, King Anu abdicated in favor of Nanar, who became the king of Nibiru. And Marduk stomped out and took charge of the earth, and been causing a lot of trouble, and Nanar sent his people, and they were assassinating each other. But recently, Michael, you've told us in some of your publications that Galzu had intervened and gotten this agreement that Marduk's job as a shit stirrer is over, and now he can relax, and now it's Enki's turn to bring us into the age of creativity and,
Indeed. They told me specifically when I met them that everything in their own culture and succession of kingship was based on something called the processional cycle. And at that time, I didn't even know what that was. But, here to find out, it is the traveling through, the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius. And they told me that with the age of Aquarius, that their own succession of kingship would change, and how they related to humanity would also change. And that was February 14th, 2009, from what I understand is the true, that's in the song, The Dawning of the Age of Aquarius. The clues that they give in celestial alignment is February 4th, 2009. From what they told me, at that point, the experiment is over of accelerating making us experience our own mental energy in an accelerated fashion, so we hopefully process what we needed to process at a quicker rate. And according to them, it worked unbelievably so, even beyond their own, imagination, and that we have earned the right, according to them, their own words, to be treated as equals. And now it's, even though the age of Aquarius, they've withdrawn, Team Bad Cop, I call them, they've withdrawn their multidimensional influence over the minions. But as you know now, this isn't really out there much, but, people need to understand who Galzu is, because he's not Anunnaki. He was a representative of all that is, who, when he came down, according to Zecharia Sitchin, in his works, that Galzu, he was a very respected teacher, to Anu, Enlil, and Enki. And when he came down, they listened, And it was truly Galzu who was behind this experiment of duality or free will, or however you want to look at it, making us experience both light and dark, unbiasedly, in an accelerated fashion, in an attempt to help mankind evolve fast enough for the end of this grand cycle, which was 2012.
Right. So Galzu was a ambassador of the creator of all. They called it the creator of all.
The prime creator. Yeah.
The prime creator. So was that a being? I don't think so. I think it's just a level of existence or the totality of everything and everyone. So what's going on now? Does anybody have an update? So Galzu has come down. There's all this intervention. Things shifted. We're in the age of Aquarius. What's keeping it from actually kind of like dissolving, that there's total disclosure, that,
they tell me timing is everything. If you look back to right after 2001, and most enlightened people know that 2001, the 911, wasn't what we've been told, and it was more of an inside job. But right after that happened, President Bush at that time, which they're really the ones that instigated this, right? They had a 98% approval rating with the public. So imagine if right after, and that's not that long ago, imagine right after 2001, even if the extraterrestrials came down and told people the truth, well, he had a 98% approval rating, and especially if the government at that time tried to spin the alien contact as they're invading us, it wouldn't have had the desired outcome. And from what they told me was, from that point, people started to need, their treachery had to be exposed so people understand why there's massive changes needed to the system. And truly what we're talking about is Earth and humanity becoming a galactic society and interacting with a larger community. And I think that we're in good hands, and they know, to release the treachery before they come down and just reveal themselves, so people will understand. And all the systems that are not truly for the whole, these systems that only benefit the oil and banking families, those have to go. It's just that simple. But if there wasn't systems that are truly just and have worked for cultures for millennia, waiting in the wings, it would be a disaster. But they told me long ago that back when Clinton was president, they said, when I seen the economic system of the United States about ready to collapse, that would be the sign that we were super close to total disclosure and first contact. And I didn't know what the hell they were talking about, because back then everything was hunky-dory, But now I understand, and, even though it's throwing a lot of people into fear, I'm joyful. Because the Federal Reserve is just a sham anyhow, so I think it's all under divine time, and I think we're in good hands.
So
I know there's a lot of suffering, though. I wish we could just get the party started, but...
Right, get the party. So you're saying there's systems on hand, because if we take out this whole system with no plans to replace it with something better, then there's a chance something worse will come in. So do you have any ideas of what systems they're talking about? I know that Sasha's been studying in the information written up by Wes Penry that there's a contingency plan for what we're going to do once the monetary system collapses. I guess it's going to be pretty much universally. Do you have any ideas what's going to come down after that happens? Do you want to speculate? Anybody want to speculate? Go ahead.
Well, I can tell you I'm in contact with the Knights Templar, and if anyone's got the true physical wealth to free humanity, it's the Knights Templar. And from what I understand, they have more gold in their possession than it's been mined by the rest of humanity in our history. But the fact of the matter is that, as I understand it, more enlightened extraterrestrial civilizations, they don't have money the way that we do. And, perhaps we still need stepping stones to get to a new system. I believe, there's something out there people can look into, a subject called Nazera. And truly it is a whole system of things that make sense that would bring us into a new reality. I don't know if what is waiting in the wings is going to be called Nazera, but I think it'll be something very similar, which touches all the points of what we would need to do to clean up this mess that we're in and bring about true beneficial change in the freeing of humanity from the control and manipulation of, who are the remnants of the Roman Empire, these Illuminati bloodlines and oil and banking families who they've went dark side, man. It's that simple. They've chosen to misuse their power over others, and they're going to learn very soon of the folly of their decision.
Okay, Clay, do you have any ideas of what might happen if we have this total economic collapse, and what new systems might be waiting in the wings for us?
Well, I guess it'd be pure speculation. I know that some futurists and economists have put out, if you want to look up the Venus Project, that's one that's kind of a futurist ideology based around a no-money economic system. But I kind of think that won't be a concern in terms of it will just resolve itself if we do our own self-work. And I know that sounds a little trite, but I don't know. I think some of the remnants or some of the symptoms are coming up through geeks. I think Bitcoin is probably a co-opted or counterfeit version of what actual digital currencies might consist of in the future. There's multiple digital currencies that exist now that people are using to exchange services and goods, and I think that there'll be a point, just like your computer, in terms of the technology that Bitcoin utilizes, or you have a node computer, a system that actually mines the Bitcoins by putting in its own algorithmic sequences over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. You actually obtain Bitcoins or receive Bitcoins through this mining process, and I think we function the exact same way. I've heard, that's why currency is called currency, is because it's essentially that's why assets are liquid, and that's why you charge your credit card, and that's why you receive your change when you purchase something. I think these things are essentially a counterfeit version of our own chi, and these experiences will just kind of these concerns won't be there the more self-work we do. We'll just end up having an experience where, value creation just occurs by us being ourselves, which is what systems used to be like, I think, back in the day. And when you have and Michael says these ET groups that they don't have money-based systems. Money-based systems were a counterfeit, basically a counterfeit system to substitute chi, and also to buy goods that actually come directly from the planet. That's why you buy trees and you sell them for money when you could just build a house with trees. But I think there'll be some sort of heavily evolved version that will come into our awareness and reality and actually be a life application. And so some of these, I think they're kind of middle school attempts at coming up with some sort of values-based system that allows people to not have to worry about a career or worry about a job. And technology will now allow at some point for a lot of the menial type of tasks like taking out the garbage and washing dishes and stuff that we consider to be menial work will be taken care of technologically speaking. Like self-driving cars at some point, they'll be much more evolved, but they'll be the ones taking out your garbage, and they'll be the ones, and it won't be some sort of transhumanistic. That's the counterfeit version, I think, that the Illuminati and some of these other negative groups are trying to impose, that we're, allowing them to do that. But at some point, there'll be a purified version of in a technological a technological economy where we won't have taxi drivers, and we won't have dishwashers, and we won't have garbage men. A lot of those tasks will just be handled for us. We'll just have the technology to have it dealt with. And it's interesting that the United States is one of the first service-based economies. We've outsourced all of our manufacturing, and in some senses we see that as a really negative thing because we don't make any of our own goods. We let Taiwan and China and Bangladesh make all of our shirts and our socks and our computers and stuff. But at some point, I think service-based economies, in the pure sense of the term, will be the places that receive the most quote-unquote chi. We'll be doing service-based work. We'll be assisting humanity in its growth, education, and that type of thing. And so I don't see, what system will take its place. I think it'll just evolve into something that is more of a lovingly based, optimal means of exchanging value.
Awesome.
Wow, thanks.
Hey,
Okay, so
folks,
we got to wrap.
I do have to hit the restroom real quick, so I'll just step back in and tell you when I'm back. But carry on.
We're just going to wrap it up. If you want to just say your final words, and we'll just everybody will go. If you want to just say goodbye, okay, everybody.
Yeah,
Michael,
sure.
It's been a fantastic show.
Hey, Michael, it was really cool talking to you. It's been years, man.
Same here, man. And I've been wanting to touch base with you just because, actually, I look up to you on a pedestal because you put me on this path of looking into these most harmonious frequencies and what they are. So I just wanted to thank you, first of all, and it's been just awesome being able to pick your brain about it and you to, reveal your wisdom to the rest of the world. So thank you.
Oh man, no problem. And you're doing the same thing. Like you're front running a lot of this info that's waking up minds. And
thank you.
I dig you, man.
I dig you.
Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate it. This is great.
Thank you
I
so
really
much.
enjoyed it.
I learned in the therapeutic model that you give for humanity is it was something that I was getting images as you were just describing your method. I was imaging as you went along with the as though it were a guided visualization, and I love the way you structured it. Thank you.
Clay, do you have a website or anything? And I know Michael has michaeldhill.net, I think. Like Clay, how do people do it? Or your Facebook page? What do you have?
I just have a Facebook page. I don't really have a website or anything. People can just message me. It's Quanta Price.
Quanta Price. How do you spell that?
Yeah. Quanta Price.
Okay. And that's it. I guess, Michael, are you gone? Did you leave? I guess you left.
No, I'm still here. I'm just shaking back and forth.
He's doing the dance.
Yes.
What did Lindbergh do?
Okay.
Dancing is good, though.
Cool, man. Well, I'm happy to hop back on if you guys ever want to talk again.
Absolutely.
We'll have you again. Yep, we're going to be doing these shows on a regular basis around different topics, and so we love your contribution. If you have anything you want to send to me, send it to me at aquarianradio@gmail.com. Listeners, if you have questions or things that you would like us to discuss, please send your suggestions to us at aquarianradio@gmail.com.
I still want to get into the resonance of the archetypes as the Anunnaki gods make their presence stronger and stronger, and as we enter the full-on age of Aquarius.
Right, so that's a future show. With that being said, love and blessings, and I'm going to end this show with Planet of Peace by Jaiya Earthchild.
Perfect. Aloha.
Sharing one home. Our home is a planet of peace. Planet of peace. Planet of peace. In this vast universe, we all share this planet Earth. We have shared the air since the dawn of time. No one takes a breath saying this one's mine. We share the sun, we share the heat. It's time to learn to share the land in peace. You who govern choose to spend more on war than we can comprehend. We insist to share our wealth, food and water, home and health, teachers, trees and medicine. Then the time of true peace can begin. We are all one human family, sharing one home. Our home is a planet of peace, planet of peace, planet of peace. You of every nation are family to me. I feel such consternation that you suffer while I walk free. I will do all that I can to help unite this family of woman, child, and man. The leaders of our nation, are they wise as well as strong, or boys in imitation, pointing that he's God, threatening the future, endangering us all. The people of all nations are united to end all war, for we are one human family, sharing one home. Planet of peace, planet of peace, planet of peace.
Ugh, this phone drives me crazy.
Excuse me, I'm the Sprint intern from Sprint. Try my new iPhone XR with an amazing liquid retina display.
This is amazing. Mind if I snap a few photos? Look at that color. I love this display.
I'm gonna need that back.
Switch to Sprint and get iPhone XR 64 gigabytes for $0 per month with an eligible trade-in and a Sprint Flex lease. Visit a Sprint store, sprint.com/iPhone, or call 1-800-SPRINT1.
Phone $0 per month for 18 months after $31.25 per month. Credit applied within 2 bills. If you cancel early, remaining balance due. Excludes tax. Subject to credit. $30 activation fee. Coverage and offer not everywhere. Restrictions apply.